when Miss Morel will join us.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so I am recording, and so we will. You are familiar with the agenda because I sent it. So we're starting off with Miss Lee welcoming us.
Well, yes, and I'm so glad to welcome this team together and to hear all of the good things that Dr. Panton is going to be sharing about the CNA and school improvement process. So we are going to collaborate together and see what we need to do if we need to make any final adjustments.
Okay, so I have sent the process to you, and so what I'm going to do is just share my screen very quickly, so we can make sure that everyone understands the flow of the meeting. Okay, all right. So here was the proposed agenda. You will start off, Dr. Patton, with just reviewing, first of all, your comprehensive needs assessment and just giving us an explanation or a summary of the findings from that particular assessment, your identified strengths, your challenges, your overarching needs, also the root causes, and anything else that really that you want us to share, that you want to share with us, so that we can have a very clear understanding of how you got to the action steps that are outlined in your school improvement plan. And then what we'll do is we'll pause for a second to see if there's any questions, clarifying questions that are just centered around the comprehensive needs assessment. Then you will go into outlining and sharing with us the action steps that are in your school improvement plan. Then we'll talk about the fact, have you started to work on your short-term action plan? And we know after Miss Lee and Tia Samuel's session this past summer that we are pulling things directly from the school improvement plan to the short-term action plan. If so, then you can start sharing with us just what you've done so far. If not, not a problem. We'll just talk about, well, what are the things that you're planning on working on with your short-term action plan, especially for the first quarter. Then we'll give Dr. Morel an opportunity to talk about, what she heard and what's the district support that they can provide. And then, any feedback from that point and then next steps. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So we're going to turn it over to you. You should be able to present. I will stop sharing.
Okay. So yes, good afternoon, Ms. Lee and Dr. Kilcrease. I appreciate you all providing the opportunity for me to share the work that all stakeholders at Mercer Middle School engaged in for not just our comprehensive needs assessment process, but also the development of our school improvement plan. So basically, just to give an outline, there were a couple of days that were established and set aside for various stakeholders at the school level to engage in collaborative planning sessions where we reviewed various data points. We engaged in some triangulation to determine problems of practice, and then also looked at some potential evidence-based research strategies for implementation for the following school year. So those dates are basically there on the screen, May 1st and 2nd, and then May 9th and 10th. Those dates basically were clearly identified to ensure that our teachers could engage in this process during their planning periods throughout the course of the school day. So every grade level, even front office staff, you name it, everyone was involved in this process. But then from a leadership team standpoint, we identified additional days that were a combination of our already scheduled leadership team dates, which is where you would see April 25th and May 9th from 3:45 to 4:45, but then also days after our traditional school calendar ended, where of course they received, some supplemental work agreements to engage in this work on May 26th and May 30th from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. So during that time frame, you see that session one, we engaged more in reviewing the self-assessment data, some additional review of data, triangulation, things of that nature. And then in session two, we drill down deeper into the problem of practice, the root cause conversations, looking at those evidence-based practices as well in order to develop our school improvement plan goals, as well as looking at next steps for establishing our Q1 short-term action plan for next school year. Right now in the pipeline, as it pertains to sharing all of this information with all of our stakeholders, is that it's scheduled on July 28th that we are going to share all of these action steps and our Q1 short-term action plan during our initial meeting with staff on the first day of pre-planning on July 28th. So of course, at Mercer Middle School, we believe in that 4D motto that data drives the decision to our destinations. But of course, we want to make sure that everyone is very much familiar with the Georgia systems of continuous improvement, and we consistently bring this at the forefront every time we engage in discussions of this nature to make everyone aware that all the work that we do is focused on the whole child. Where we understand that that's our why, we then focus on our what and what we're going to do to improve, which is the how. So as pertains to conducting our comprehensive needs assessment, we understood that we had to establish that team, plan the assessment, collect the data, analyze the data. So when we established the team, we ensured basically that administration was available, all the teachers, as I previously stated, various community stakeholders, even our family and community relations specialist was present. Of course, yes, Ms. Lee was there, as well as Dr. Miller were present in terms of establishing the team. But then when we looked at, it was time to review our data, we basically understood that we had to look at both quantitative and qualitative data points. So quantitative data from the aspect of, all of our iReady content mastery, GMAT projections, closing gap data by subgroup, how the students, projected to perform on the Lexile, whether it was grade level or CCRPI Lexile targets, as well as our attendance data for staff and students and the student discipline data. And all of this data was consistently tracked and updated within our progress monitoring workbook throughout the course of the school year. But then from a qualitative standpoint, we made sure to look at our high impact practices survey data. And we share that with staff as well. Our GSAP survey as well for, our staff and parents to include that summer report, which was then shared again because it was shared previously prior to this process. We also looked at, our focus walk data, whether it was leadership team, admin, instructional awareness walks, things of that nature, goal setting conferences by students, daily writing, focus walk data. So it was a lot of different quantitative and qualitative data points that were utilized in this process. So after gathering all this data and making sure that we identified every possible data point, we then engaged in that digging into the data group activity. And we made sure that we grouped our data based on those components of CCRPI: progress, closing gaps, content mastery, readiness, but it also we make sure we focused on the process data as well, which is also outlined within the CNA process. So we had a couple of questions that we asked specifically to the staff in terms of what is the data you are reviewing imply by the level of instruction. So it's a bunch of different questions about, does the data reveal learning gaps? So we allowed them to really engage in answering these questions individually and partner and group in order for them to really figure out, okay, what does this data say about the work that we are doing here at Mercer Middle School and what we can possibly do differently as we plan for next school year as well. As pertains to that last question, what additional data should we consider as we identified school-wide overarching needs as well? But then when it was time for the leadership team to re-engage in this process, because they were part of this process as well, but when they re-engaged with this process, we had a different set of questions. More so like, well, what is this data really telling us? And based on our norms, we were able to really be honest, open, and transparent in having these courageous conversations about what we believe the data is telling us. But then more so, again, going back to that question, what additional data should we consider as we identify our school-wide overarching needs? Questions about the subgroups, what is that saying to us, which reveals some very interesting findings as well as to why we believe that some subgroup data was outperforming other subgroups, as well as are there any extraordinary or external factors that are impacting student learning? So those are some questions that we really engage in as just the leadership team during this process as well. But then we had to, of course, remind everyone about how all these different data points impact that overall CCRPI score. We had to keep the main thing. We had to keep this at the forefront so they understand that everything that we're doing, how it contributes to earning points, because we don't want to leave any points on the table as pertains to earning the CCRPI score. So, of course, I just wanted to share some of the images of the work that was done for, and I'm not sure why I was doing this, for the school-wide data sources and activities where, Ms. Lee guided, our stakeholders through some conversations about some hopes and fears that they have about this process. So that way they can become comfortable with the process as well. Then as they looked at different data from teacher and student attendance and pass-fail data, what were some notices and wonderings? And then you would see some of the other posters as it pertains to those CCRPI components to include some of the process data from the focus walk and the leadership team data, collaborative planning data, lesson plan submission data. We try to leave no stone unturned as it pertains to reviewing and analyzing different data points at Mercer Middle School for this past school year. So then it was time for us to, engage in some of these stakeholder data review sessions. And we want to make sure that we capture the work that our stakeholders were involved in. And Ms. Lee did an excellent job in capturing these moments as well, as we see here our teachers and our leadership team members engaging in this work as well. But then through this process, we were able to identify some strengths and challenges, which is also outlined in our comprehensive needs assessment. So from a coherent instruction standpoint, the strengths revealed were basically that we definitely have a defined instructional framework in every classroom. We have different components, collaborative planning, data teams, PL. We engage in leadership team and admin walkthroughs. But then some of the challenges came from strengthening certain processes on correlating some of our assessment data into instructional practices, empowering the teachers into understanding the power of ensuring that they are consistently utilizing this data to inform all of their instructional practices. But then also having consistency with teacher clarity implementation. And we saw evidence of this not just in leadership team and admin walkthroughs, but also in our GSAP's summary report as well. But then from an effective leadership standpoint, our strengths definitely, rose to the top during our high impact practices survey, where yes, we will reveal as having a highly functional leadership team, which came out from our GSAP's summer review as well, because we meet regularly and we review data that is always aligned to those CCRPI components and targets. But then, of course, we consistently use that data from these walkthroughs to drive PL and support. But some of the challenges that came with that was making sure that the leadership team pivots a little bit as we transition into next school year to include monitoring of collaborative planning practices in addition to our short-term action plan monitoring process. But then, of course, making sure that we strengthen our teacher support as well as pertains to standards task alignment, lesson design, and again, data analysis that I mentioned previously. But then from a professional capacity standpoint, our strengths that rose to the top is basically our planning for professional learning calendars and our year-long PL calendar, as well as monitoring teacher implementation of these PL sessions and impact on student learning. However, the challenges came where we saw that ongoing instructional coaching and support with differentiated PLs was not evident. It was not consistent. While it was kind of sparse and spread out throughout the course of the school year, that is something we need to strengthen our focus on, as well as utilizing staff goals and aspirations to build leadership capacity. So that is basically within the professional capacity component. But then from family and community engagement, our strengths were more from establishing and sustaining our community relationships with business partners, which is evident through our school council. And when it's time to have any school-wide events, we definitely have strong partnerships, which is a strength to be commended, as well as effective communication, ongoing communication with parents and stakeholders from both positive and not so positive aspects, because we focus on the whole child and make sure that everyone is well informed on what they can do to assist with ensuring the overall success of their child. But then the challenges came from ongoing parent communication from staff and more so teachers in the classroom, making sure that they were consistently communicating with parents and using our model that we have in place that was established through our PL sessions throughout the course of the school year from our family community relations specialists to include.
I hate to disturb you, but
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think Miss Morel, is it Dr. Morel?
Miss Morel. Mm-hmm.
Miss Morel is outside of your office. I guess she thought it was at the building.
Okay. Could you hold on 1 second?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I would have been really on time if I would have joined Teams. I thought it was here. No,
No, we thought, yeah,
It
we
was on
had it.
Teams.
I'm
It's
so
virtual, but
sorry.
no, you're fine. You're fine. We're glad you're here. He's doing a
Okay.
great job so far. So we start.
So why are
we
you
start-
laughing at me? I was like, 'cause
It's
I was
okay.
like, let me
It's
go
okay.
and see if he stayed in the cool office.
Yes,
I walk all
ma'am.
the way over here in this hot. Okay, I'm so sorry, guys. Thank you.
Miss
Yes, ma'am. No
Morel.
problem.
Miss
Um,
Morel, hold
Yes.
on. You did say I'm in the parking lot. I was like, okay, so maybe she had a meeting somewhere. She's trying to get to her computer. So I did not realize that you didn't realize this was a virtual meeting. But anyway,
I
it is
did.
okay.
That's
We're
on
glad you're
me.
there.
My apologies.
Okay, we're glad you're there. And so, what Dr. Patton is doing right now, and what he's done so well so far for the past about 20 minutes or so, is
Yes.
he's going through his comprehensive needs assessment process.
Okay.
So
Okay.
continue, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So then also some of the ongoing challenges was basically having that ongoing professional development on how our staff can improve their family and community relations as pertains to making sure that everyone is aware of the different ways in which they can support the overall success of their scholars here at Mercer Middle School. So then from the last component on supportive learning environment, our strengths definitely rose to the top as it pertains to our ongoing instructional support structures, from before and after school tutorial to our Saturday Academy sessions. We definitely pride ourselves on the intentional planning of and identification of those Saturday Academy dates as it pertains to, being strategically planned around, the release of our district progress reports as well as our report cards as well. So that way the students have additional support from 9 to 12 on identified Saturdays to receive those instructional support structures. But then also another strength that rose to the top was our high school credit attainment that's being offered to 8th graders, as well as our Rate of Promise program, where we offer great acceleration to over 8 students, as well as opportunities for mid-year promotion. But of course, they have to meet certain requirements to be eligible for the Rate of Promise program as well. But then the challenges that were revealed was more so consistently cultivating an academically challenging environment. While there's evidence of it, we need to establish and maintain consistency with this practice as well, because we want to consistently engage students in embracing that growth and mastery mindset where they understand the power of self-monitoring, reflection, embracing mistakes, and then persevering towards mastery. So those are some of the challenges that we're going to focus on as we transition into next school year as well. So then we transition into identifying and prioritizing our needs. And we were able to review identified problems of practice. So as a leadership team, we engaged in a popcorn activity, POP, acronym for problems of practice. And we used, a tool whereby we consolidated all of the problems of practice that you see here that were identified by our stakeholders in those previous sessions on May 1st, 2nd, and 9th, and 10th. So we use that documents to then create this problems of practice identified based on those systems, curriculum, instruction, assessment, things of that nature. And then, of course, every leadership team member were able to then identify what are the top 4 problems of practice that they believe we need to work on. And that's that picture there to the far right. So based on that information, we were then able to narrow down and have some conversation about which problems of practice we're really going to focus on before diving into the work with our root cause analysis process. So through that, the first overarching need that was identified that rose to the top was the fact that internal stakeholders lack an understanding of how to analyze data and use findings to determine student instructional needs. And that was mentioned previously when I spoke about some of the challenges not too long ago. The second overarching need that rose to the top was the majority of students lack the writing skills necessary to master the cognitive demands of argumentative, opinion, and narrative on the Georgia Milestones end of grade assessments. So then the third overarching need was that while there has been improvement in student Lexile levels, student data from iReady and GMAS reflects the majority of students are still not meeting the Lexile expectations outlined by the state. And the fourth overarching need was that due to the implementation of new mathematics standards, all teachers will not only be learning a new curriculum, but will also learn how to incorporate evidence-based practices such as math modeling in their mathematics classrooms. So after we took these 4 overarching needs, we then engage in our root cause analysis, where we use the 5 whys on those top 4 overarching needs, or our top 4 problems of practice. So yes, we used our 5 whys. We engaged in that process. We went through a couple examples. We made sure that our stakeholders were aware of the problems to avoid with the 5 whys. This is an example that we used that was non-educational based, that we went through with them for them to understand the 5 whys, but then also one that was educational based as well for them to really engage in that process. So what Ms. Lee and I did on this day as well with our leadership team, we then identified, we selected a problem of practice that was not one of the top 4, and we engaged in that conversation ourselves and that banter so that way we could model for them before we relinquish control for them to engage in their own root cause analysis. So they were able to see that it's not an easy process, that it is going to get a little bit messy, but you have to stay the course in order to really figure out the solution for your problem of practice. So this is some of the work that they engaged in. We took some pictures based on the top 4 problems of practice, just to make sure that, we have this evidence here. But what you will notice is that there are some color dots next to some of those solutions. So what Ms. Lee identified as we engaged in this work together was that there were some kind of recurrent themes, and we identified those and revealed them to the leadership team as well during our time together. So when we then engaged in the root cause analysis, we identified 2 root causes for each overarching need. So for the first overarching need, the 2 root causes were that teachers are not demonstrating decision-making skills derived from data, but then also teachers do not understand how the data correlates to their instruction. So those were 2 root causes that came out of that first overarching need. And my apologies that I didn't have enough space to put the overarching need again so we could see the alignment to the root cause.
Well, I do have it. I have it on the feedback sheet, so I can see it. I'm reading along with you.
All right, good deal. Thank you. So then the other 2 root causes that came out from the second overarching need was that ELA teachers may not have fully understood the expectations of writing as outlined in the standards and how it is assessed. But then the second root cause was that lack of strategies and focus in writing during ELA classes. So then for the third overarching need, the first root cause was that teachers were not using Lexile data and other sources to drive the selection of complex texts. But then the second root cause was that there was a lack of professional learning to support teacher understanding of Lexile measures. Because during our root cause analysis, we explained to them that we have to look at processes and not people. But then for the last overarching need, the first root cause was that teachers have traditionally used a teacher-centered approach to learning. And of course, they will need to pivot that with these new math standards. And then root cause number 2 was that current ES training was limited to unit overviews that was optional and was not scheduled at a time that teachers were unable to attend. So after we engaged in our root cause analysis, we then were able to look into creating our SMART goals, action steps, things of that nature. So this is the last part of the comprehensive needs assessment. So I'll pause for a cause right now. So anybody has any questions, I can answer at this time.
Thank you so much. First of all, Ms. Lee, if you wanted to say something, because I was getting ready to just dive in. Okay.
I'm good, Dr. Kilcrease, because it was Dr. Panton and I were like elbow partners through this whole thing.
Okay, well, the first thing that I would like to say is very thorough job, especially on the data collection and the analysis. I'm so glad I had you to present this because the narrative that I saw in the school improvement plan gave me a lot of information, a lot of rich information. But then this right here with the visuals, I was able to really see how the faculty and staff and your teams were involved and engaged in the work. So it seems like you all had some very productive days, but it took you several days in order for
Yes,
you
ma'am.
all to have these very focused conversations. So thank you. Kudos for sharing the images, because it really showed me how you all were engaged in that work. Okay, so and I sent you this feedback, some
Yes, ma'am.
additional information that came out of your data discussions is that you all really saw that your EL population, that you're concerned about it, that they are not going to meet the targets in any of the content areas. And we do know about the current situation where those students are served. So my question is, will there be a way to address that in the plan? Or, and Ms. Morrell, maybe this question should be directed to you. Will the district provide any supports, or are there any ideas of how we can consistently monitor the progress of the students that are at the center, since though that data is tied to the school? Has there been conversations around that, or can we as a group brainstorm some ways of where you all can monitor their progress along the way?
So yes, yes, yes. So yes to just even talking with Dr. Panton around our initial conversations, I think as early as what, January, February sometime, coming on board with him and him sharing those concerns with me. And then of course being able to work with that school, of course that would be West Chatham Middle School, to be able to not only for, of course, for Mercer, but other schools as well that have students that are participating in their program there. So we actually made some huge shifts. I was boots on the ground actually at the school, helping them with their testing plan, assessment plan. I think I know, Dr. Pan can attest to me sending those communications probably got on their nerves every day around participation rates. And kudos to all of our principals. And especially, of course, we're here celebrating Dr. Panton Mercer, because he had a laser-like focus on every single child. And so I appreciate it, because we wouldn't have been able to do the work without, of course, all of our leaders on the ground. So yes, so those are some early steps we took, even during our summer leadership retreat on June 2nd. We had Brandon Carter to come in, who I'm sure you guys know from Okie Finoki Risa, and work with our principals, going deeper into the portal, looking at subgroups, all of these things that they could correct prior to the deadlines, any errors and things of that nature. But yes, we have kind of covered all bases, particularly as it relates to, of course, that subgroup of EOL. We are, as a team with secondary governance and academic affairs, we are looking across the board, not just here at Mercer, but across the board as it relates to K-12 with ELL. So yes, we are continuing to provide those robust supports. We're looking at things as it relates to our growth opportunities, things where we may have some strengths, but certainly we recognize that this is a big rock for us. It truly is. Just alongside with specially designed instruction, I know we're talking about ELL, but I just want you to know that we have a laser-like focus on all of our students, all of our subgroups, and we are going deeper. That particular school did reach out to principals, or we tried to work also with testing and assessment as it relates to making sure they had that participation rate up. Our focus going into this upcoming school year is not, of course, just participation, but actually performance. How are we making sure they have the necessary supports? One thing that we identified already as a team is the work, and with you all, of course, with the WIDA Can Do. That's one of our, our district goals, the WIDA Can Do standards and those different descriptors. So yes, ma'am, we know that that's a heavy lift for us, and we will certainly, any support that you all can provide, we welcome it. But I just want you to know that we are collaborating to make sure we have the necessary. Of course, we have the PSYOP training. But we are currently in the midst of working with that team, our ELL team. We are, of course, working on developing a welcome center. So there are a lot of different irons in the fire, if you will. that we're working through to make sure our schools have the supports that are necessary.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. That information is quite helpful. And yes, what I can do is just reach out to our people at the state to see if there's any additional support that can be provided. But I really do think that my question and is there feasibility? Put it this way: is there a way that we, as Mercer and any of your other schools, but can't? Are there any data points, any progress checks? Are they doing iReady also at the center? How can we
Yes.
add those individual students' data on an ongoing basis and then have and be informed of how their learning is being scaffolded? Does that make sense? Just
It
like
does.
okay, so how
It
is
does.
that feasible for us to receive information like that?
I believe anything is possible. Let me just say that. And I
Okay.
think the way that ELL is designed here in Savannah Chatham is a little bit different. Yeah. So of course, as long as we have access to the data, then of course the answer is yes. We would just have to extract what's necessary for each school, and in this case, Mercer students. And what we could do is work with data and accountability around seeing what steps are necessary to make that happen. So of course, do understand that'll be a shift for us in terms of maybe how things have been done in the past, but something that we welcome to happen. And these are some of the wonderings I had as well with transitioning into this role and continuing to serve our schools that came on board with us in January. So yes.
Okay, and so I guess, and Dr. Pan, do you mind taking your background off so I can see? Do you have your camera shifted to where I could see Miss Morel? No, yes or no?
She'll have to come around.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't want to be not looking at her and she was looking at the computer. So if she's just talking, I'm fine. Okay, no problem. So I guess my question. Okay, I guess my question also is, do we know of the data that they are capturing, the formative data that they are participating in on an ongoing basis? Are they required to take the iReady, or do you have the same expectations for them?
Okay. Right. All students, regardless of where they may be enrolled, are held to the same expectations as it relates to testing and assessments. All of our students.
Okay.
It's just that this model is a little different than I know what I'm accustomed to, where typically you would have your own students on your own campus. So because the way things are structured with the hubs, so yes, it's just a matter, I think, of working with testing and assessment to ask those questions about moving forward. What can we do so that schools can have access to their students? Based upon those that are enrolled in the ELL hub at West Chatham. One of the things that I know that we're moving towards is trying to look at how we can spread the wealth a little bit. In some instances, maybe allow, of course, our schools to keep their students, but there's a lot of
there's a lot of logistics.
There's a lot of different details.
And listen, we're not here to criticize or ask or wonder why you're serving them that way. What we're trying to see is what is the feasibility of us just getting our hands on what's going on and influencing to the best of our ability anything that we can, and influencing and supporting those students as they're over there, at their center. Miss Lee had a question or a statement. Yes, ma'am.
I do have a question, and I do not know. First of all, hello, Miss Morel.
Hello. I'm sorry. I'm swatting away the mosquitoes. We're in Savannah. I know.
My question comes just from the instructional lens. So I know at Mercer, like, lesson plans are housed somewhere where they can, we can view them and get access to them. Would there be a way for us to review lesson plans of, like, the teachers that have our students over there? Because you know, if there's like 60 something kids, I think it's what we came up with, that
Mhm.
we have no instructional, you know, oversee over. And so just that maybe we could look along and kind of, I don't know, offer someone some input. I don't know if that's too picky, too, you know, getting into it too much, but we're just trying to figure this out too
Right.
from
And
that
so,
standpoint.
yeah, so I like that idea, quite frankly. I think one of the things that we can do is certainly bring our principals together. And not just, of course, Dr. Panton, but
Right.
other school principals as well who have students at West Chatham. So we can do some thought partnering around just what you're asking. And you know what? It would be very similar to the conversations and the progress monitoring that is now occurring with our two alternative schools, Building
Right.
Bridges Middle and High. And
Right.
so, to your point, that is exactly what I kind of went to the principals and said, hey, I'm listening to everything that principals are saying about their students and their data and how they want to still be engaged in that process with monitoring how their students are faring. So I think the same thing can occur in this situation with our ELL students for sure.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
great.
we appreciate that, Ms. Morel. We really do. Because you know, throughout the year, Ms. Lee is working alongside Dr. Pan and the team, and they're trying to make projections about, you know, what we think is going to happen in the end. And then we've been kind of off. And if we look at the trend data, you know, our EL population has not been faring as well, but we want to make sure that we can do everything that we can that's within our within reason, and that's within our influence to help and support them. And so we don't want it to be a last minute thing. We want it to be kind of ongoing and along the way. So
Absolutely.
okay, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you all entertaining that conversation. And so then the next thing I think that I said here, okay, I wanted to talk about that. I want to really commend you all on the multiple stakeholders that were involved in the process. I want to commend you all for the data collection and the quantitative and the qualitative data, the vast amount of data that was collected and captured, and especially even the data from GSAPS and the surveys from GSAPS. Kudos to you all for that. I think that you all had an ample amount of data to determine the trends. And let me see if I have anything else. I think you clarified everything else for me except for one thing. So in the narrative, I didn't mention this. In the narrative, I thought that you all did a great job with really capturing what came out of the conversations. And I extracted this from the comprehensive needs assessment. It says student discourse is a vital component to creating a mathematical rich classroom environment. And so you are correct. And I think that at first, I didn't see how your plan addressed that. But now that I have a better understanding of the cubes problem solving process, I see how that relates. So I had sent that feedback to you, but I want you to understand that it clicked for me last night. I have been delving into you all's plan for like 3 days. I have been really engrossed, but it clicked when I saw, okay, this is how we're going to engage the kids in talking mathematically and speaking mathematically. But I also see that that could be a tie into your learning walks. It could be a tie into your focus walks. So we won't be like, the teachers won't feel like we're doing all these different things, and we can show them how it's connected. Well, those are all the questions and the feedback that I have. I think that you all did a comprehensive needs assessment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kilcrease. I greatly appreciate your feedback. Yes, ma'am.
So, Ms. Morel, do you have anything to add to this particular part of the plan before he starts to present the school improvement plan?
I don't. Of course, I know I did miss a component of it. And of course, I will go back and watch the recording and then actually look at the presentation as well and take a deeper dive. I know just from the feedback that I received that it certainly was value added with the experience, of course, in Macon. And trust and believe, I wanted to go. I wanted to be there. Okay, just know that I wanted to go.
No.
I had already signed up on my own. But at any rate, I heard it was a great time. I did talk to Mr. Childers about it, and he shared the same. I actually reached out while they were there. And so, and I watched all the Twitter videos and photos and everything. You guys had a great time. I saw you guys up there dancing and singing. So y'all were having a grand old time. So I'm looking forward to being a part of this PLC because y'all know how to do it.
Well, we're looking forward to having you because we heard that you're just as much fun. So we look forward to it. We look forward to it. Okay, so at this particular time, Dr. Pan, I will turn it back over to you so that you can do the presentation of the school improvement plan.
All right.
Ooh, just I won't be right your back.
No problem.
Okay, she's right on top of me here.
All right, so now we're going to look at our school improvement planning process as it pertains to how we establish our SMART goals and really, set the bar extremely high as it pertains to that. And I will talk about that momentarily, as well as how we engage in identifying specific action steps when we also looked at and empowering our staff with, looking at effective research-based strategies and interventions. We provide them with access to some of those resources for them to review during this time as well. And then also identifying how we're going to monitor not just the implementation, but monitor as well the effectiveness of each action step that we believe will help us either meet or exceed each of those SMART goals. So in order for all that to happen, we created a process activity plan template for them to capture all this information, which is the same framework that you would see in our school improvement plan as well. So, of course, we had to do a quick review because I like and I believe in creating and recreating awareness about everything that we do in the field of education. I don't take it for granted everyone just remembers or knows. So we did engage in what SMART goals are. And we kind of walked through a process where they had to revise and refine different SMART goals to determine if they believe it really met all the expectations of a SMART goal. But then also we looked at different types of SMART goals based on a performance SMART goal as compared to a process SMART goal. So we engaged in some discussion about that as well. So before we actually looked at our current GMAT student performance data as of that date in May, Ms. Lee, engaged the leadership team in some really thought-provoking conversation where we looked at our current student performance data. And we saw that for math, currently we only had 27 students. So we converted the percentage into actual number. We saw that we only had 27 students that performed at proficient or distinguished levels for math, and only 42 students that performed at proficient and distinguished. We wanted to really shift their thinking and change their mindset about looking at only developing learner levels and above, but no, let's look at those proficient and distinguished students. So she really posed the question, well, what if we found or identified 30% of our current student population, which equated to 50 students, or possibly 20% that equated to 75 students. And then she even pushed the envelope a little bit more and said, well, what about 26% that equated to 100 students that we believe could really hit the mark in terms of performing at proficient and or distinguished in math and ELA. But then we engage in conversation about breaking that down. Well, if that's school-wide, what does that mean by each grade level, but then also by every class? So by breaking it down this way, Ms. Lee was able to really challenge all the members of the leadership team, and setting the bar high. And yes, we often get into that practice of, 3 to 7 percentage point growth. We want to be statistically significant and things of that nature. But, Ms. Lee really helped us, look at this through a completely different lens as pertains to how we actually create these SMART goals. So then was provided with an opportunity to, create their SMART goals, and, they shared it out, and we engaged in some thought-provoking conversation about formats and things of that nature as pertains to SMART goals for ELA, math, science, and social studies. But prior to that, we wanted to make sure that they understood, how to use these evidence-based practices and interventions and what that really means. So we provide them with access to all the John Hattie's instructional strategies and effect sizes. And what does the effect size really mean in terms of the impact on student achievement and learning? To include even the Marzano's 9 high-yield instructional strategies. And then Ms. Lee brought in some additional resources from What Works Clearinghouse for math as well as reading, because we understood that there were specific components that we had to focus on based on the overarching needs and the root causes that rose to the top, on the previous day. So with that as well, we engaged our staff, our leadership team also, in conversation about how to decide on specific action steps that as it pertains to our short-term action plan, how to look at each action step within your school improvement plan and break that down and scaffold it into various action steps within your short-term action plan. So of course, we engage in some conversation about how to take, the SIP goal and the SIP strategy to then create, your short-term action plan strategy, because it must align with your school improvement plan. So we're able to really bridge that gap and create that connection so they understand it's not that we're disregarding our school improvement plan, but we just created a plan that's more manageable and feasible for us to monitor throughout the course of the school year. So in this example, we took this short-term, the school improvement plan action step, and we showed how we will scaffold it, so that way it's more, digestible action steps within our short-term action plan as well. And then we're going to monitor it through our leadership team data reporting calendar. So that was just an example. So here are some examples of that template that I mentioned previously that we utilized for the process activity plan for our leadership team groups, because they worked in small groups at this point to engage in the work. They were assigned overarching needs and root causes, as well as their SMART goal, and then they started engaging in that work. So what I want to share next, it could look like, organized chaos is what I will call it. But basically, I firmly believe in being transparent and peeling back the layers. So that way y'all could see that we then engaged in some true brainstorming. And this is where we just started, unleashing and starting to talk about if this is a school improvement, plan, goal, what action steps do we need, but then also what PL is required in order for us to successfully and effectively implement each action step. And we had to be, extremely honest with each other about this in terms of scaffolding and saying, okay, well, we need to focus on this component in quarter one and this one in quarter two, and that way we kind of build upon each other in order for us to effectively meet or exceed those school improvement plan goals by the end of this school year. So then with that as well, what you see to the far right in this slide is where we started mapping out, and this is just, incomplete version. We started mapping out from July onward to January what professional learning will be required. But then at the top left-hand side, you will see some tally marks next to ELA, Math, Science, Social Studies, Span, Connections. The intentionality was that we wanted to make sure that we were not potentially overwhelming specific departments with too much PL, whereby it was so much for them to digest and implement that we then end up, losing effectiveness or of the implementation of the action step. So at this time, I can easily transition to my school improvement plan that has the action steps and the goals and stuff outlined, but I felt it was necessary to share this work, which then led to the actual formal document that you basically reviewed, as well as Ms. Morrell reviewed prior to our meeting today.
Yes, thank you.
So would you like for me to share the school improvement plan at this time?
I do.
Yes, ma'am, no problem. All right, so do you see it right now?
Yes.
All right, so basically our first
hold
goal.
up. And hold up.
Sorry.
And you can start, you don't have to start here. You can go all the way down to where we start with the action steps.
Correct. Yeah. So this is
that's where you're on page 52. Okay, yeah, I see you. You have to make
Yes,
it a little bigger for me. Make it bigger for me.
No problem. I'll zoom in.
Thank you.
There we go. All right. So our first goal, you can tell, we definitely believe in raising the bar, was that we were going to increase the percentage of students scoring at developing learner level and above in those 4 content areas. For ELA to go from 38% to 62, Math 43 to 69, Science 17 to 50, yes, Social Studies 36 to 62 on our upcoming spring GMAS administration for spring 2024. But in order to meet or exceed those goals, our first action step was to provide embedded professional learning for our teachers, again, on how to analyze that data, and more so how to plan for small groups based on interventions and enrichment, using this data and how to have those specific targeted data talks with students based on those intentional small groups. But then, of course, the way in which we were going to monitor the implementation of that was that we want to ensure that 100% of the teachers will plan for small group instruction using data to inform the learning needs. Now, yes, We do not expect that by the end of August, we're at 100%, but in our short-term action plan, we scaffold that out in terms of being able to monitor, a gradual increase in terms of teachers implementing this action step as well. And then, of course, the method for monitoring effectiveness is that 70% of students will make a passing score on the weekly assessments that are aligned to the instruction. So then our action step number 2 as it pertains to this goal is to create a schedule for our leadership team members to conduct learning walks, provide PL on how to utilize our instructional awareness tool that's provided by Godot to ensure that the look-fors are aligned with GSAPs. To then conduct calibration sessions on leadership team members to calibrate the observation data into the action steps that support improved student outcomes, as well as provide PL for our leadership team members on how to give effective teacher feedback that address teacher growth in pedagogical knowledge and classroom management as well. So in order for that to happen, we monitored for the implementation where 100% of our teachers, of course, will reach operational level by the end of the school year. And then we're going to monitor effectiveness by looking at 70% of our students will score within that range of 67 to 70 on our iReady reading standards mastery checks on a bi-monthly basis. So within the iReady platform, 67% is set as that passing score, which is why we created that range of 67 to 70, because we want our students to kind of understand that really a passing score is 70 or above. While iReady will say 67, we wanted to make sure that we communicated that expectation. For action step number 3, we looked at utilizing Marzano's 9 strategies for effective vocabulary instruction to teach our students academic vocabulary and science. We saw that there was a need for that, and to create interactive vocabulary word walls and provide training on how to teach each of these 9 strategies, where we'll look at teaching one per month and then monitoring the implementation of that in our science classrooms. So yes, the plan is for 100% of the science teachers to implement the focus strategy each month, as evidenced by those focus walk observations. And then the effectiveness will be based on 75% of the students will make a 70% or higher on those teacher-created assessments that focus on that action step as well. So for action step number 4, we would utilize the district social studies pacing guide to build a roadmap outlining units that need to be taught to ensure adequate time for teaching and learning. So the students will demonstrate mastery of those standards, as well as provide professional learning for social studies teachers, teach them how to utilize those Godot instructional resources for social studies as well. And again, yes, we want 100% of our teachers to utilize the developed, pacing plan. And then, of course, we want 70% of students will make a 70% or higher on those weekly assessments in science and social studies. Any questions so far before I move on to the second goal?
Question myself
Mhm.
about
I'm gonna put my feedback until the end, if that's okay.
Okay, no problem.
okay, that's fine.
Questions.
I'm sorry.
Ms.
Okay.
Moran, you wanted to say something, ask something?
No, I can wait till the end. If
Miss
you'd like to wait till the end, that's fine.
Are you gonna remember?
I will, but I probably can ask it just really quick.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
just had a question around the first goal. I know it was a little lofty, so I was just wondering about the percentages that you had from 17 to 50.
Mhm.
Is that 50? I can't see.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Mhm.
And that's GMAS, correct?
Mhm.
I just think that I'm with you on we want to jump, but I'm just concerned about maybe putting that out there as a goal, because I would really want to stick with like your 3.6, and if you get higher, great. That's just the wondering I had. That's all.
Yes, ma'am. And I appreciate you asking that question.
Mhm.
But that lends itself back to the reason why Ms. Lee engaged the leadership team
Mhm.
in that discussion to change the mindset in terms of translating the percentage
Mhm.
into actual number of students.
Mhm.
And when we think about for science, that's one classroom.
Okay.
So we're looking at half a class scoring at developing learner and above, we believe should be attainable, not just within this plan, but just every school year. So we want to help, our teachers, and we're going to provide the supports with changing that mindset. And we believe that our 8th grade science teacher for next school year will definitely be able to meet the mark.
And let me just say, I'm with you on that. I love to get 100%, but I just want to make sure that the goals that when you break it down and drill down to the number of students, to me, that makes a lot of sense. I just want to make sure that these goals are realistic and attainable at the same time. But I'm with you. I'm high expectations for every single student and for all of our teachers, of course. But I just want to make sure they're realistic from our baseline data, where we came from and where we are now. That's all.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and you all just made me think that we will do this. We'll slow down a little bit and we'll do the feedback after each goal and action step. I think that will probably be effective because we wouldn't probably remember if you start, So I do appreciate you slowing us down, Ms. Morrell. I too was kind of concerned about those high percentages, but again, as you just stated, when you look at it and you start breaking it down with the number of children, when we do those 3% increments, we're talking about 2-3 kids,
right?
Or 5 kids. So I say for this year, go for it and see what happens.
we might as well, right? We might as well. All we can do is continue to grow, right?
Right.
And move up.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Right, because
we're on this train together.
There you go. There you go. Really, but I still believe that when the CCRPI comes out, there still has to be some, and y'all do a great job with this, some teaching of what the targets are for each one of those subgroups.
Yes, ma'am.
So that they can experience some celebrations just in case they don't meet these goals.
Correct.
Because more than likely your goals far exceed even the targets that are outlined for the students by the state, by us. You know what I mean?
Yes,
so
ma'am.
Just continue, continuous conversation around that so you can celebrate and just that laser-like focus so that you are making those projections to see how you will fare. But I really do love the fact that you all are reaching and you're stretching and you're not depending on those targets, which I think are extremely low. It really demonstrate low expectation of our students.
They're the state targets.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Miss Lee, what do you want to add? You're part of the team. I know you were part of his team and you were part of the planning, but you have anything you want to add to this particular goal?
Well, we had this conversation. We knew this was going to
happen.
But the other piece of this is we created a 3-year timeline.
Okay.
There you go. See, that's what's missing for us. Okay.
To exit, we had to. We're aiming big. We know it, but we also know what happened in like 8 weeks when we targeted instruction, what happened with Lexals. And I don't know, if we can just target this instruction and align it. And I don't know. But we're going to be watching our data. We know.
Okay.
Well, let me ask another quick question in regards to what you just shared, Ms. Lee. When you said over 3 years, so what do those percentages look like over 3 years? Do they continue to be? Is the 3 years included in these percentages or no? So I guess I'm just trying to visualize. I would have to go deep to be able to understand what it looks like over 3 years.
I gotta find my email to Dr. Panton where I put it.
Oh, don't worry. I can look at it later. I was just wondering. For us,
because in absence of that information, it could seem like lofty, but that makes sense now that you said that you all have spread that out for 3 years.
Yeah.
Ms. Morrell, could you agree with that?
Yes, I can. That's why I love hearing the 3 years, because maybe when we, like you said, when we look at the year by year, then this percentage, of course, maybe not as lofty, but I'm with you with high expectations. We must raise the bar for our students.
Yeah, we must. We must.
Let's see. Y'all keep talking. I'll keep looking.
Okay. Well, while she's finding that, I will
Mhm.
go on, and I've already shared a preliminary feedback with you. And of course, what I'm sharing with you now is just suggestions. So I will share
Yes,
my
ma'am.
screen right now, just on this particular goal, so that we can have just a brief conversation before you move on to the next one. Um, so that um, Miss Lee explained to me that, you all were thinking globally, and I was kind of thinking more concise. And so my suggestions really are just ways to reword it to where it won't be a whole bunch of action steps in that one action step.
Correct.
And so where you see the highlights, is where I made some suggestions to maybe just reword it. It's the
Yes, ma'am.
saying the same thing, but just rewording the first action step to engaging teachers in the implementation of the assessing cycle, to plan collaboratively to meet students' needs during the instructional focus block and other scheduled intervention times. And the reason why I specifically said that is because you said you're going to be doing small groups. So that may happen in class. That may happen
Mhm.
during your REP class. That may happen during your Saturday time. It may
Mhm.
happen during that time that you all are calling that instruction, the IFB. So
Right.
this particular, if we reword it, if you all decide to reword it, this will be directly aligned to some of the verbiage that is in the GSAPs, because we do want you to utilize some of those targeted action steps in the
Yes, ma'am.
GSAPs. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Solution Trees PLC teaching, assessing, learning cycle, but when you started talking about students being involved and
Mhm.
you all trying to make decisions based on data, it reminded me of that. So I just put a picture of it in there
Yes, ma'am.
for you. But if you need more information on that, I certainly can share that with you. But it can be any type of assessment cycle. There's, some people do plan, do check, act. Some people
Mhm.
do several, the 8-step process. It doesn't
Yep.
matter what you call it or which one you use. I was just thinking that if you set an assessing cycle, then you can make sure that your teachers understand the steps that go in that. And that way we can make it more concise as an action step. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so when I reviewed this on yesterday with Miss Lee, basically I'm definitely in agreement with this. It's definitely a different way for the teachers to understand the importance of engaging in this process as well. And then also modifying the verbiage so that way it definitely aligns with our GSAP summer report as well for expectations. So yeah, this is definitely, some recommendations I will definitely, incorporate into modifying my plan. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Miss Morell, if he wanted to modify or to just kind of reword an action step, is he able to do that at this particular time, or do we have to
It's a
go with
draft.
we
Yes,
have to go? It's still a
Mhm.
draft. Okay,
yes.
great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. All right. So 100% of your teachers planning for small group instruction. How will you all capture that data and how often?
So basically, that will be captured through reviewing our lesson plans that are submitted. We're going to look for
Mhm.
evidence of that, as well as during our admin focus walks when we know that those small group instructions should occur in the classrooms. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you'll be sharing, that's the data that you all as a leadership team will be looking at on an ongoing basis.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
All
Oh,
right.
I
Yes.
see Miss Lee has her hand up.
Yes. Miss Lee.
I do. I just want to kind of set some context for that 100% too.
Right? It's scaffolded. Yeah.
Well, yes, we're doing that. But also, the thing about it is, because I think even on Q1, we left 100. They have revised collaborative planning.
Mm-hmm.
So these teachers are going to have one-on-one planning with a coach. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so it won't be a coach and 4 or 5 other teachers. It's that ELA teacher and that coach. So the things that we're asking of them to do, there's no reason it shouldn't transfer this time because they're going to be with that person.
Okay.
So that's why we kind of went that route.
Okay. Miss Morel, do you have anything to add to that before I move on to action step 2?
Other than I absolutely love that idea, and I can't wait to see that in action.
Yes,
Yeah, me
ma'am.
too. Me too. I can't wait to see that in action also. All right. So yes, in talking to Miss Lee yesterday, I was told that because on all the timelines, it pretty much said July 2023 to
Yes,
May
ma'am.
2024. But she says that you all are doing that you all doing a more thorough job of breaking down
Yes, ma'am.
the
And the short-term action
times of.
plan.
Okay, great. Okay,
Yes, ma'am. Hmm.
so I had taken this out where it says demographic trends, and this came from your needs assessment. Demographic trends and patterns observed by the school-wide Title I committee denote that the RTI process must be reinforced and implemented with fidelity in order to identify students in need of academic and behavioral support services. Additionally, the student identification process for our REP classes must be reevaluated to ensure that these students receive the necessary services in their ELA and math classes based on their identified needs. And so I just said that I think that when we really and truly implement a thorough assessing cycle, you are really addressing this concern that came out of your needs assessment with ensuring that MTSS, RTI processes are in place. They're based on data. You're actually meeting the needs of the students, whether it be in tier 1 instruction for prevention or tier 2 for intervention or tier 3 for remediation, because it's all based on data. So I just I just put that, and that's why I was suggesting you all rewrite the action step 1, because then you can take care of that concern too with the RTI process. That was just a little extra, just in case you said that you didn't agree with the learning, the assessment. Okay, so when we went to action step 2, a lot of this in here was geared towards the instructional awareness walk tool. And Miss Lee and I had a conversation, but you and I and Miss Morrell have not had the opportunity to have a conversation. I was telling her I did not know if that instructional awareness walk will always address what it is that you're looking for, right? Because there's a lot on there, and a lot of that stuff is very broad, right?
Right. Okay.
And in addition, I was telling her that there's sometimes that you won't see what it is that's on that list because it's just not time to see it, right? And so therefore you could get discouraged from the data that you're collecting. So my question is what's the ultimate goal for conducting these walks? And, I was told that it's because you really want to and truly make it a growth model where you can give teachers some feedback on their pedagogical practices. And also you talked about management pieces and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just suggested that, because when you're talking about doing the learning walks, like what we learned this past retreat, you're doing all of these things. You're
Right.
utilizing, you're creating look fors, you're looking at the instructional core, you're calibrating, you're doing all that. So I just said implement learning walks to calibrate and to provide feedback to teachers on the instructional core, which is teacher knowledge, student engagement, and content rigor. And then you all can choose what it is that specifically in teacher knowledge you're looking for, or specifically in student engagement, what you're looking
Right.
for, or particularly in content rigor.
Content rigor. Right.
What are your thoughts about that?
That was a very perfect way to consolidate what we said in the initial action step. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Because it basically summarized everything that's outlined there. Because it's honestly the same thing.
Gotcha.
So,
right.
yes,
so when it comes down to this goal, then if you go to this suggestion, the implementation, 100% of teachers will reach operational level on instruction by the end of the year. That was based on the instructional awareness walk, which Ms. Lee is going to continue to do. Dr.
Right.
Miller's going to continue to do, because that's a Godot's process, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So y'all would if we go this route, you might want to think about utilizing something else to leverage. And I was thinking, I don't know if you already share your teach ratings with your teachers of where they are, or if you have an expectation for those ratings to improve based on these learning walks and this feedback. I don't know. But I mean, that's just something I was throwing out there, but I think you probably need to rethink this implementation goal.
Correct.
If we write it this way, if we rewrite it. Or what are your thoughts?
I mean,
Morel, y'all jump in. This is a team.
So first, it will have to be determining which teacher key standard or standards will align. And then, of course, you always want to make sure iterator reliability. At my school, I only have 2 teach credentials, so it'll just be myself and my assistant principal. So I'm not sure if that will be, with just 2 observers, if that'll be valid data points to look at effectiveness of implementation. It could add to some other data, but for that to be the sole data source is my only question, because it's not a team of people.
Right.
So you can engage in true conversation about what was observed.
So the question could, go on, Ms. Burrell, and then I hope I don't forget what I was going to say.
No, you go ahead while you have that thought. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And I was really trying to hold on to it. You should have seen me. I was like, oh, Lord, am I going to remember what I was going to say? So the question is, we know we're probably going to engage in these learning walls and all that. But what I heard you say is you are more concerned about teacher growth, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you said something earlier. I don't know where it was, or if it was in the narrative or the conversations of that came out of the data collection, all that. But you said something about really implementing a true coaching cycle for teachers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
So do you think you probably want to could you move in that direction, as opposed to, well, we said we had mentioned that in the GSAPs, but I mean, we don't have to pigeonhole you to everything that was in the GSAPs. But I'm just wondering if an instructional cycle, coaching cycle would be more valuable in what you're trying to accomplish. Don't know, but that's what I wanted to say. But Ms. Morel, you can go on.
So for me, I guess just a point of clarity. So are you guys, I guess, have some wonderings around how we're monitoring the instruction? So what tools we're using to be able to provide feedback? Because I know you talked about teacher keys, but so do you have some wonderings around what other instruments are you using to provide that feedback? No,
I was just trying to make sure that they understood that if we rewrite this, and we're talking about doing learning walks and all of that, right? Because the learning walks are more about the people who observe than the teachers, right?
Right.
So I was like, maybe this instructional awareness walk up, and then the teachers get into operational level is not the data they want to use for this implementation goal. That's all I was saying.
Okay.
Because that's a Godot instrument.
Yeah.
And that may not even be what they're looking for. You know what I mean? It's a lot on there. It's great stuff. And so I was just throwing out another particular data point that I know that is captured. And because they talked about teacher growth, and he also said something about their professional knowledge or their pedagogical knowledge, and also management. So I was thinking, okay, there's two standards that are specifically speak, and then you can look at that over time to see if teachers are if their teach ratings in those 2 standards are growing. I don't know. It's just something to think about.
Okay. Well, one of the things thank you for the clarity, but one of the things that popped into my mind, just as you were talking about doing the walks, and we come in, we do the instructional rounds. Our district right now, we are starting to work towards district-wide Cognia accreditation. And so with that, our schools will have access to the Elliott tool. So that may be an opportunity, as well as we're looking at the alignment to whatever standards it may be. So I just wanted to add that.
And so for clarification, when you say instructional rounds, are you talking about Harvard's Elizabeth City and Richard L. Morris model?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Christian and Rhonda. So with that being said, we're going to shift the focus to instructional rounds as opposed to learning walks, but it's
Do
the
it right.
same. Yeah, it's the same
Mhm.
process. It's just
Right.
going to be different things. You're going to describe before you analyze. You're going to analyze before you predict. You're going to predict. You see what I'm saying? Because remember, I
Mhm.
told you all that at the session that you
Right.
can either do instructional rounds, you can do sales learning walks. So let's shift to instructional rounds so that you can be in alignment with what the district is doing.
Okay.
Okay.
And I can help you all with that. And Narelle, I can share the facilitation guide that I was going to share with them. You know, we can get together. So just as long as we can make things align, I
For
think,
sure.
and use that same language.
Mhm.
Because remember, I kept saying learning walk / instructional rounds because I
Mhm.
knew that some districts were already utilizing in the instructional rounds protocol. But I'm familiar with both. I've done both. And I think both of them are highly effective.
I agree.
So are you in agreement with saying implement instructional rounds to
Yes, ma'am.
calibrate? Okay, great. What about you, Ms. Lee?
I am. Y'all will have to
She's
do.
making notes. I can tell. She's
I
typing.
am. I'm putting it on our sheet, Dr. Panton.
Yes, ma'am.
Same, y'all. It's the same concept.
Right.
It just may
Mhm.
be different wording, but it's the same concept.
Exactly. You say tomato, I say tomatoes.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So the only other question I had, I think, with this particular one is you're talking about the effectiveness, you know, looking at the student impact, what impact it'll have on students, but you only mentioned reading. And so I was wondering, since your goal encompasses all the content areas, is there any reason why we just chose this as opposed to those formative assessments that you had mentioned in the other goal?
So, go ahead, Miss Lee. Go ahead. Go ahead. You kind
I
of
think
mentioned
we just need to change it
Yeah.
to formative.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Or I was wondering if you all were just saying that, you know,
So,
reading is universal and it's in
right.
every subject. I mean, if that's the case, then keep it.
Because when we were looking at this, just an admin team, you know, in the short-term action plan, we did have that conversation, and we kind of came to the conclusion that we should use that because, like you just stated, Dr. Kilcrease, it is universal. Because we know that, you know, we could monitor all the others, but we know that if students perform well within reading, it should also have a positive impact on their performance in other classes.
Okay. Well, you all have that further conversation and you know, and
Because
go
that'll
from there.
be more data to track, you know, in terms of if we look at all formative assessments, Miss Lee, as well.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
true. That's true. Now
I
that's
mean,
true.
we could track the data, it's going to be there, but it's going to come in at different timelines. That's the other thing,
Yeah.
Right.
based
Okay,
on
yeah.
when the calendar. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Okay, so with this next one with the Marzano strategies, and I had crossed that out, but I mean you can keep that there if you want to. I
Mhm.
mean, providing that training. I just mentioned the fact I don't think if y'all was focused on one per month that you'll be able to do a true professional learning cycle.
Yes, ma'am.
So can you think about just choosing maybe 4?
Correct. Correct. Yes, we were being very overzealous to know truly Christian Panton at heart. He is very overzealous. So yes, we could definitely. When I looked at that, I had to laugh because yes, we definitely need to just choose 4 and
Yeah,
implement those. Yes,
and then
ma'am.
maybe do 5 next year. And then I highlighted some that I thought would really and truly impact all, in case you wanted to do full staff training that would impact all subject matters. But I think this was just for the science group, um, science teachers. So, you know, either way, I think still these will really speak, the ones I highlighted will speak to the literacy push that you're trying to do
Yes,
across
ma'am.
the district, across the school.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have anything to say about that one, Miss Morrell, about the Marzano strategies?
No, love Marzano 9. These are, you know, these research-based practices have been around for a long time.
Mhm.
And we know that they work when implemented with fidelity. My only thing, and I know we're not at the end just yet, but and I think this surfaced earlier, just with the delivery to teachers, so that they are not overwhelmed, because a lot was thrown out in this presentation, all best practices, all research based. And I know even from a district perspective, when they go to our upcoming teaching and learning conferences, they're going to also hear more of that, especially around literacy and then our new math standards. So I guess at some point, our team needs to really kind of hone in on how we communicate it, roll out, if you will, to make sure, and you lifted this earlier, Dr. Kilcrease, you talked about not overwhelming the teachers. I believe you did say that.
Yes.
So that would be the thing that I would really want to focus on, because we already know, we know the teacher burnout report and all of that stuff, but that we still have the job to do, high expectations for all of our students, all of our teachers, ourselves included. But I think we just need to make sure we continue to monitor how we deliver that to teachers, so that they, and I know a lot of times we talk about crosswalks, but I would have to have a better understanding, right, of what they were exposed to previously versus where we are now, and helping them to maybe some of those best practices with some of those teachers, if they were implementing with fidelity, if that was occurring, and then helping them to understand what's coming down the pipe now.
So that's a good question. What is coming down the pipe? What will they learn at the teaching and learning conference that you think is centered around literacy? Because it looks like they, Dr. Payne, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you tried to pare it down, say, okay, science will be doing this, math will be doing the new standards, ELA will be doing the writing, social studies will be doing just planning, collaborative planning. So,
Correct.
but is there anything, Ms. Morrell, that you think aligns to some of that focus that we probably need to be shifting our thoughts to? So it won't be two things. The district has this initiative, and then we have a school initiative.
Right. So I know our district has been over the course of these last 2 years around teacher clarity. And so I don't know, I would have to actually go and look at the sessions myself, because it's my understanding, I think teachers may be registered for their sessions. So of course, which is good, but I know there's a huge focus on literacy, the science of reading, all the way up, of course, because we know they learn to read, to learn throughout all of the years. So I'm sure that, again, there's alignment here, but from a teacher lens, they will tend to see that things are different when they may be the very same in terms of best practices. In the same sense, we were just talking about, instructional rounds versus instructional walks or observation or whatever. So just sometimes the terms can throw them off and make them think it's something totally different when it may not be, So that's the only thing. I was just trying to see it through the teacher's lens of how they may, receive this. But I think the beauty of this, of course, is the work that has already been done through your PLC and Macon and those teacher leaders and our principal, AP, that whole leadership team that was there to be able to bring this back and work in collaboration with the teachers on the ground here. But I don't know how many teachers you have attending that conference. But I think it's just something that, be considerate of as we continue to, move forward. And so they'll be hearing a lot of things. You know how that works.
So if the instructional coaches and let's say the teachers who were on the leadership team or who were there, if they hear something at the teacher and learning conference that's aligned to this, Miss Dr. Patton, would you be willing to change it up? Okay, because y'all weren't very specific with some of the professional learning, so we could align whatever the professional learning is with what the district's going to do. Ms. Lee, thoughts about that?
No, I think that's great. I think with the PL, what the leadership team tried to do was look at that action that we need to
Mhm.
implement and
Mhm.
think about where the teachers are and what we need to do to get them to that full implementation. But
Gotcha.
I mean, these plans are fluid, so certainly
Yes.
we
Mhm.
can
Okay.
adjust.
Okay.
And let me ask another question. Congratulations on being awarded the math manipulative grant. That's awesome. I was like, woo wee. Listen, so what about the professional learning? What type of professional learning will be provided for teachers' use of those manipulatives?
You
What kind of
Okay, so-
professional learning do you need?
Well,
that-
I know that when we talk with our principals, and you were present, I believe, about manipulatives across the board, that some of them were concerned about teachers' use of it, and maybe some are the reason why some have not used them as much in the past is because they're not as comfortable.
Mhm.
So you tend to see more sage on the stage, and more sit and get and working problems on the board, that kind of thing. So you don't see that acceleration of learning as much as we would like to, which we know that's the shift in terms of best practices. The most research that's recently come out in regards to remediation versus acceleration. But at any rate, I just know that we've had conversations around with our content and learning specialists. We need to make sure we're providing that to our leaders, number one, and of course to our academic coaches and our teachers. When we look at those new math standards, and just helping them to understand that instructional framework, that's going to be a shift with lesson planning, and of course the use of those manipulatives. So I think when you say what kind, the best kind you have that's going to that's going to help our teachers to really be able to implement with fidelity as aligned to what the state, in terms of those standards, are asking them to do. With modeling and helping,
Right.
all of that is a shift. And our team is working on it, but I just wanted to know if you guys have anything in addition, being that the schools have been awarded that grant.
Well, you'll see in this plan that I think that Dr. Patton and Ms. Lee have spoke to some of
Okay.
the modeling
Okay.
and the professional learning that they're going to provide for that. But
Okay.
Ms. Lee, do you want to talk about MathCon, or did you have anything to add to that about the training with the manipulatives?
Well, I don't want to overstep if Dr. Panton was going to
Oh,
share
Dr.
what
Patton.
he knows, because Mr.
It's fine.
Jackson is working
Uh-huh.
feverishly.
Yes, he is.
We have discussed at great length. I've led schools through the implementation of new frameworks like this.
Mhm.
And so we've been kind of collaborating. And so the idea is that these math teachers are going to teach these frameworks. So what he will do during collaborative planning is the lessons from that unit that are going to be taught in the upcoming week. They will have all of their manipulatives for that.
Mhm.
They will go over and do the task together so
Excellent.
that they know how to use the manipulatives. And to me, that's going to be one of the most powerful pieces. Then, like you said, sit and get at a training or something, like him embedding it in the work. And so I think he's working on that framework with Engage, and that.
Excellent.
Engage, explore, apply,
Yeah,
reflect.
Explore,
explore.
apply,
It's still
Reflect.
You got it
new
down.
to
You got it
me,
down.
and reflect.
That's
awesome.
so we're all learning together.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Thank you. All right. And then with this one, the question was this, as Ms. Morrell has already said, and overwhelming the teachers. You all had talked about creating vocabulary assessments, but I was wondering if you could leverage the formative assessments that you said that they already have to do for this
Correct.
particular effectiveness percentage. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Instead of requiring them to, do another assessment.
Correct.
All right, this may be the last one for goal 1. You're talking about the social studies and helping them to be on track so
Mhm.
that the kids will be exposed to all the standards before the test, right?
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
I just took some verbiage from the GSAS where it talked about refining collaborative planning. So I just said refine the social studies collaborative planning time to ensure teachers deconstruct standards, align assessments and assignments to the rigor of the standards, internalize unit plans, and utilize Godot's instructional resource to guarantee student mastery of standards prior to the implementation of Georgia milestones. So just another way to word it as opposed to having all of those different steps.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a suggestion. Okay. All right, you ready? I'm going to give it back to you because now we're on goal number 2.
All right. So, all right. So now for goal number 2. All right, so goal number 2 is to increase the percentage of students scoring at developing learner above and English language arts from 38% to 62% on that spring 2024 Georgia Milestones Integrated Assessment Administration. The first action step with that is that the professional development on the use and implementation of research-based instructional strategies to build teacher clarity, such as deconstructing standards, identifying learning targets, communicating success criteria, things of that nature, student engagement, academic rigor, cultural competence, cultural responsiveness, and classroom management for all of those core content areas. And then, of course, we'll monitor the implementation of that. And we know we now need to change instructional awareness walk observation tool to the instructional rounds observation tool that's going to be provided to us by Ms. Morrell. And then, of course, we're going to... You have a question?
Oh, there's not a tool. The instructional rounds is a process.
Sorry, yes, it's a process.
So we're gonna have to find a goal for that.
We have to find a goal.
I mean, not goal. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to find
a tool,
some data. Some data.
So
we're gonna have to. What you're gonna have to do? Let's see. Hold on for a second.
Okay, so we're still on monitoring implementation, correct?
Yes, we're still on monitoring implementation because what it is that you're talking about the teacher clarity, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you can go back to those things that you're going to a walkthrough that's looking at are the standards posted, are they, and that is on the instructional awareness walk observation tool. So I think
we can keep that.
You can keep that, and you can just pull out the specific things
that we're looking for. Correct.
That you're looking for.
The process.
Good deal. Good deal.
The process is very similar to it is what you saw us doing.
Okay.
So,
gotcha.
What we came here.
Okay. Good deal.
Whatever tool.
And then for monitoring effectiveness, 50% of our students will make typical growth as outlined in the iReady on the middle of the year administration, and 75% of the students will make typical growth by the end of the year iReady diagnostic assessment administration. But then where 70% of the students will meet mastery on 67% of those iReady reading lessons on a weekly basis. And then coming down to action step number 2, we will implement 2 paired texts that integrate writing per week in all ELA classrooms. Student writing will be reviewed using the GMAS writing rubric. Students will then be taught how to use the GMAS writing checklist to develop a proficient writing response, and teachers will gain a deeper understanding of the writing assessed on GMAS through job-embedded PL during collaborative planning, of course, and this will include understanding the importance of Standard 10 to select reading passages, student lexiles to match and support students to text, how to calibrate scoring, and provide student feedback. And that's for that action step for goal number 2. But then we're going to monitor that by 100% of teachers will implement at least 2 paired reading writing activities per week using appropriately challenging reading material by the end of the first quarter. And we'll monitor effectiveness where 70% of the students will make a 67% or higher on those standards mastery checks administered through the iReady platform. Action step number 3, of course, we're going to make sure that we use our Title I funds to purchase all supplementary materials. We've already, identified those to basically beef up and, increase our classroom libraries in every classroom across the campus. We're going to monitor effectiveness of implementation of that by 75% of the teachers will utilize our iReady instructional technology along with all supplementary instructional materials in those ELA classrooms to improve student literacy skills as measured by observation tool that will be created. And then, of course, we're going to monitor effectiveness based on 70% of students will meet grade level and CCRPI Lexile targets by winter of 2023, middle of the year, iReady reading diagnostic assessment by December of 2023. And 70% of the students will meet mastery on 67% of the iReady reading lessons on a weekly basis. Then action step number 4, we will implement the Right Score text-based writing support. We're going to implement that next school year and ensure training is provided for our teachers to understand how to analyze the student data that will be provided following each assessment, how to align the program resources to student skill gaps, and create a classroom environment where readers write and writers read to gather information. And honestly, both my ELA academic coach and myself, we have a lot of experience with implementing Right Score. So we will be able to ensure that that is implemented effectively, as well as for monitoring implementation. 100% of our ELA teachers will administer the assigned assessments as prescribed by the Right Score company, and we will monitor implementation by 100% of teachers will attend those PL experiences to ensure they are utilizing the components on resources with fidelity. And
Hey,
that
Ms.
is it
Morrell?
for
Yes.
goal
Do you have a
number
question? Because
2.
that's it for number 2. I call that the literacy goal. That's the
Yes,
one
that's
where it's
literacy.
all focused on the ELA instruction or just literacy, writing and reading and all of that. Morrell, you have any clarifying questions before I start my feedback?
I guess for me, I'm more so I guess about maybe something I don't know that I heard this, but I would like to see where students take ownership and monitoring their data.
Yes.
And so goal setting, especially when we're talking about Lexals or they're iReady. So so opportunities for, we used to call them data digs.
Mhm.
So whatever name you want to give it,
Mhm.
but really making sure students are more accountable for their performance and they understand what it means and they can monitor just as well as the classroom teacher. And I know sometimes we do that by grade level, houses, or however you want to do it, but you can make it a fun competition, classroom to classroom, that kind of thing as well.
Well, I'm so glad you said that because I was going to make a suggestion, and it's not. It pertains to this one right here.
Okay.
And I'll just have to rewrite it, Dr. Pan, because I told you that wasn't my final draft. So this action step right here, where you're purchasing supplementary materials to support classroom instruction, I just think that that's a one and done. I don't really see the value in that particular action step. So I was talking to Ms. Lee, if we could reword this some way to give an expectation for accelerated reader, right?
So actually, accelerated reader needs to come out.
No.
No. Yeah, it has to. Yeah. It needs to be removed because that's no longer approved for us to use federal funds. But I had to leave it. Let me explain that. So I had to leave it in there for this year because remember, Title I funds, they kind of flow from one year to the other. So from last school year, we already got approved and we have purchased that for this year. So we're using it, it's continuing to this year, but we can't use it for next year. We cannot continue to allocate Title I funds or school improvement funds for accelerated reader because it's no longer listed in What Works Clearinghouse. So we cannot allocate funds to purchase that. Yes, ma'am. They do not have any research that shows the increased impact on student achievement in middle grades.
And may I suggest something? And this may not be something that you can do now. But because of course you have title dollars, our high schools are implementing, we had a small pilot this past semester 2, with Light Sail. And so this upcoming year, all of our high schools will be implementing Light Sail literacy program. And that may, if it's not Light Sail, maybe something else, but I'm just going with what we know. Our principals have used, and those that were able to do it with fidelity, they saw the growth. And so I'm sure you guys are familiar with Reading Plus. So Lightsail is like Reading Plus on steroids. And so when you talk about Lexals, they have that partnership, of course, with Metametrics as well. So if you don't have something else in mind, that could be something that may be advantageous. Even if you weren't able to do it across the board, you could at least do it, maybe pilot it with a grade level or something. But I'm just sharing that because I thought about, I understand what's going on with Accelerated Reader, but this may be more value add for you. So I'll send some information so you can look at it, because they start in the early grades all the way through high school.
Okay.
So let me ask a question. So is there still an expectation from the district to utilize iReady for reading?
Correct. Right. And that's why we decided to get the right school to assess with the writing.
Okay, gotcha. So I think that you probably can reword this right here, and I'll write it in here to talk about an expectation for iReady, right?
Yes.
And then, as what Ms. Morrell just said, because I have in my notes here, goals for students. So when I asked how will you capture this, I was thinking that you probably, as a part of this effectiveness, is engage students, or so many students. I was thinking accelerated reader at the time, and there's a goal for accelerated reading. You want them to make at least 80%. So I was thinking in that route, but I don't know how you can do that for iReady, ready. But I do agree that there needs to be some ownership on the students' part, and there should be some goal setting for them. And maybe because Ms. Morrell, they do have an action step up under Lexals. Lexals has one of its own literacy goals. We might want to put it under there.
Okay.
So just to let y'all know is that within our instructional focus block calendar, we actually have already identified different days in which the teachers will engage in student data talks. As it pertains to our so it's not within our plan, but it's within another plan in terms of expectations for implementation. Yeah, because we did that last year and the year before, and we're going to continue with that.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
so are you going to rewrite this? Is this still remaining in here?
So that verbiage actually came directly from my Title I program managers, because we have to ensure that we have some verbiage in there for our Title I budget. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, gotcha. But you're going to take out the accelerated reader?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to leave it in there for this year, but I have to take it out for next year.
But you're leaving it in there, but you're not using it. Is that what I hear you saying?
Correct. I have to leave it in there because I'm using it based on previous Title I funds.
So the question is this: are you all going to use accelerated reader with the students this upcoming year?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then. That's all I need to know.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
and then just for clarity purposes, even though you have the student piece monitoring or the goal piece, are you going to include it in this plan as well? I know you said you had it in another plan.
As in for the student data talks?
Are you going to include that? Because I think that's important that you show the student ownership and component there.
But I believe that's in our short-term action plan.
Yeah, and I think they're going to pull it out in here with this first action step.
Okay.
When they're talking about have data talks with students, it's going to be up here in this first action step.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's on our short-term action plan, that verbiage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Miss Lee, you have, I can't see everybody, but I don't want anybody's voice to be left out because we are a team. You have anything to say?
No, I'm taking notes. I'm good.
Okay. I actually had said, I think that this action step 1 needs to say something like provide professional learning on teacher clarity, something of that nature. I think teacher clarity needs to come out somewhere here so we can meet the needs of our GSAPS report, our GSAPS targeted actions.
You said it needs to come out?
No, I think it needs to be explicit. Provide professional learning on teacher clarity, and then it is.
So it's to build the teacher clarity.
Yeah, it's there. All right, it's there. All right, that's fine. But I do have a concern with all of this stuff. That's a lot of things. So I hope that you all and your staff, and I'm pretty sure you have thought about it or you're working on it, have mapped that out. But I don't know if all of this is possible within 1 year's time. Just saying.
And I just want to chime in to say, this is the blueprint for the work. So this should drive, and back to your point about your feedback from the GSAPs, that should really be driving, as you said, that it should have that alignment. And I do believe in doing a few things and doing well. Because when we start doing so many things, it's really going to be even more challenging to monitor effective implementation of all of these things. So that's just something to put out there. I know we all have these audacious goals and going to make it happen. We have to. We're tier 4. I got it. I get it. But at the same time, who are the people that's going to make sure this happens? It's going to be the leaders, obviously, but the teachers. And so for a teacher, if I'm following on, I'm on that leadership team in my classroom, even though I got a coach working with me one-on-one, this can be quite overwhelming. But I agree with you. There's a lot here, and it's all great. But it's back to your point. What does this look like over a period of 3 years? So maybe that's another focus to look at too. What are we doing in year 1? What do we plan to do in year 2, etc.? But really honing in on doing a few things and doing them well year 1. Where are we going to get the most bang for our buck?
So that's something you can take back to the team, Dr. Patton and Miss Lee, and decide, because again, cultural competence and cultural responsiveness, all of that could be a year-long course. Year-long. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for listening. All right. Let me get to that's action step 1. So action step 2, same thing. I just kind of reworded it and just put it like in steps, just like you all did. But implement a school-wide writing plan that includes the 2-parent test, procedures for developing, monitoring students' writing, because then that can be across all content areas. If you develop a process, for all teachers, a writing program to enhance students' writing skills, so that's Right Score, professional learning for teachers, and a system for providing descriptive feedback to students regarding their writing collected over time. And we know that you all are saying that you all be utilizing the GMAS checklist for students.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I think that was it that I had as suggestions or any questions on. So we can move on to goal 3 if no one else has any questions, and I will give it back to you.
All right.
Now I'm going to tell you all it is 4:17. And so I already know that we're probably going to go over at least about 15 minutes. We'll be here to about 4:45. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
That is A-okay. I just might have to step out and go to the potty.
I just love this stuff. I love this stuff. So keep going.
I'll be right back.
All right, no problem.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll hold on until you return, Miss Morrell.
Yeah, let's do that.
No problem.
Let's just take a little
break.
2-minute break. Yes. See, Miss Morrell doesn't know that I'll put a timer on her. Oh goodness. Good. How do you feel about the conversation so far, Dr. Patton?
Well, so one thing I wanted to add, and we spoke about this yesterday when Miss Lee was with us, about the cultural competence and the cultural responsiveness. I remember my second year in the classroom, and a lady who then, further down the road became my wife, known as Michael Lene Panton.
Remember, I'm recording.
She made me aware that, oftentimes, we do so many great things and we don't really know the name for it. And as it pertains to cultural responsiveness, and understanding that the research dates back to before I was born, far too often we implement one or all of the 5 tenets of culturally responsive teaching and don't even know that we're doing it. So when
Mhm.
we look at some of, John Hattie's, instructional strategies, that of course takes into account those tenets of cultural responsive teaching. Um, and I just felt it was necessary, that stays in there. It's not that we're going to explicitly have PD on that, but that
Mhm.
basically is an embedded component, and I don't want to
Okay.
leave it out because I know that is part of the any classroom management or school-wide culture plan to ensure
Mhm.
that we do not negate the cultural experiences of
Of
our
your
scholars.
students.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you know what? And hey, I agree with you. And this is your plan, and you're going to map it out in your staff. But as Ms. Morrell said earlier, as many crosswalks and also those conversations, just like what you just had, when you show them those connections, they won't feel like it's something in addition that they're having to learn.
Correct.
Okay.
Because even when you look at the verbiage, within the TEAC
Mhm.
standards and the rubrics, you would see
Yep.
it's in there. They just don't
Well, that
explicitly
might be a good
say culture
activity.
responsive teaching.
Well, that might be a good activity.
Correct. Well, actually, during my TEACS orientation, I do highlight some of those things and allow them to engage in conversation to see connections
Uh-huh.
across the standards so they don't see them as just isolated,
Right.
standards, but how one
Right.
builds upon the other. Correct.
Exactly.
And the fact that any stakeholder at any point in time walk in your classroom, a stranger off the street should be able to see specific standards implemented, with fidelity in your classroom at any point in time.
Mhm. Right.
So, but yeah, so I digress.
I know you don't. I love it. I love it. You helped me think differently, just like the conversation Miss Lee and I had yesterday. It just helped me to think differently. I love talking and conversating with brilliant people because I'm just an ordinary gal, just trying to make it.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm simple.
I understand. And sometimes my wife often tells me I have to bring it down a notch. So she's like, Christian, you'll be all the way up here. She's like, you got to bring it down sometimes. I'm like, okay, my bad. All right. So we're back to goal number 3 now,
We're ready.
which is on increase the percentage of students meeting grade level reading targets and literacy from 33%
Okay, start
to,
sharing again. I don't see your presentation. I don't
oh, it
see
didn't come
your
up. Okay.
right. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Yeah, so the goal is to increase the percentage of students meeting grade level reading targets and literacy from 33% to 60% or higher on that spring 2024 Georgia Milestones end of grade assessment administration. And the first action step to meet that goal is, of course, to provide, PL for our teachers to enhance their understanding of what a student lexile measure means and how to match students to text, and train teachers to use scaffolding strategies to support students who may struggle reading complex text, as well as to utilize GMAS lexile data and iReady data to help teachers understand how to forecast comprehension rates when selecting those texts, and then support the teachers with identifying quality passages to use when selecting paired texts for the reading and writing tasks. And of course, to monitor implementation, we expect that 100% of our teachers will be trained by the end of August 2023. We've already, scheduled that PL for on our calendar. And then to monitor effectiveness, 50% of our students will meet grade level reading targets on the middle of the year already diagnostic administration, and 60% will meet that target by the end of the year already diagnostic administration. So that's how we've scaffolded in order to meet and possibly exceed our goal. And Miss Lee has already planned and agreed and scheduled to engage our champion educators in that process as pertains to these Lexile PLs, so we can implement that action step effectively.
Okay,
Then,
so let me share because it's just one goal, right? I mean,
correct.
it's just one
Yeah,
action
yeah, it was
step.
one action step for that goal. Yes, ma'am.
All right. So what I had mentioned to Miss Lee yesterday is that providing that training is important, it's ongoing. She said that will probably take place in August, most definitely.
Mhm.
But I said, I asked her, what should they be doing? What do you want to see? What's the ongoing action? So when she explained it to me, I said, you know what, that makes sense. So I just think that you should reword all of this to match students to appropriate text and utilize scaffolding strategies to support gaps, because you want that to happen all year long,
Correct.
right? And so she said, and I asked, well, okay, well, how would you be able to see that being implemented? And she said through lesson plan audits or focus walks. And so I don't know if you are going to take that suggestion, but then you all would have to reword that implementation goal if you do change this wording.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm not going to even suggest this now because you all are not going to be using Accelerated Reader.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Burrell, you have any questions about the Let Sal? I call that the Let Sal goal.
No, I just want to make sure as our students understand, all students understand what the Lexile is.
There you go.
And you know, again, owning their Lexile, how do they grow? And them to, of course, engage in that goal setting. It's going to be so powerful. And then a question around your media center and those books that you have, are they Lexile? They are, so excellent. So you feel that your students have been taking advantage of that to go in and get those Lexile selections?
Correct. So in addition to that, every classroom right now, we have scholastic libraries, classroom library sets in every classroom that are basically, it was intentionally created and aligned to each grade level. So you won't see, you know, a sixth grade book in an eighth grade classroom kind of thing. But then also the orientation that happens from the media specialist at the beginning and throughout every school year is to make the students aware of the power in coming and asking, well, I want to read this book. Is this at or above my grade level, or is this below my grade level? So she empowers them by showing them what resources they can go to see, and then look in the book and say, okay, if this is the Lexile level, does this answer my question for me, or do I need to look for another book kind of thing? So she won't just give them the fish, she will teach them how to fish, basically.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I do agree with Ms. Morrell, and I think we should add a specific Lexile an action step that says engage students in tracking their Lexile goals. I mean, you know, creating Lexile goals and tracking some. I don't know what it is, but I think you need to be explicit right up under there.
In our goal setting conference form during our student data talks, that is part of the template. So the Lexile.
Gotcha.
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha.
So all that is going to happen during those student data talks. Yes, ma'am.
And what about a way to celebrate Lexile's growth? You know, like school wide. Of course, we talk about your grade levels, your houses, or whatever terms you guys use.
All right.
But yes, celebrating, because when we, you know, bring forth that awareness to students, they really truly get engaged. They're competitive. You know, they begin to understand, and even of course, the parents need to be engaged in the process as well.
They do.
You know,
they do. You all, and I know you keep saying that that's going to be a part of that process that's up there, number one, but I really do think that if you all are explicit and mention it in this particular part, then you all will develop, y'all will go out and look and check and see if the kids know their Lexiles, or you know what I mean, if they're tracking them. I just think that you probably need to add that one more action step, because you only have one under there.
Right. So every September, we intentionally schedule our literacy parent night to kick off our series of curriculum parent nights. And that is when we empower our parents, guardians, other, you know, stakeholders into how to access that information and how they can continue and increase that love and passion for reading, you know, not just inside the school, but, you know, at home and outside in other areas as well. As well as the power, because we always make sure that we have public libraries. They're one of our ongoing business partners, and they come and they also are part of that presentation for our literacy parent night.
Do you all have, like, during your instructional focus, like a drop everything and read, something similar, or how would that, you know, be across the school? You're smiling, you must have something.
Yeah, so we have so part of our small group rotation, which is also part of our instruction focus block, is that we have intentionally modified it where we're going to have a technology group when they work on iReady for their 45 minutes of reading and math. But then also we're going to have a teacher-led group where we're going to be using read work articles
Okay.
for the students to engage in more close reading strategies. And we're going to,
Okay.
empower them, because we saw that ReadWorks has a lot of research on how reading those articles, daily, increases, student Lexile levels. That's right.
Excellent.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. All right, go on. We're at the last goal.
All right. So the last goal, let me share my screen. Okay, so last goal, number 4, to increase the percentage of students scoring at developing learner level or above in math from 43% to 69% on the spring 2024 Georgia Milestones End of Grade Assessment Administration. And that first action step is to implement, of course, those new standards and the units to provide embedded PL to the math teachers, of course, during a collaborative planning sessions to ensure they have a deep understanding of the tasks that they will be teaching throughout the unit. Monitor student performance on those formative assessments that are outlined and embedded in those units. And this may also include teaching teachers how to analyze student work to determine next steps for instruction, as well as provide training for teachers on how to use those manipulatives that we spoke about earlier required of the tasks, and how to create a mathematics classroom that includes student discourse, exploration, and inquiry using strategies and models. And of course, we're going to monitor implementation by the expectation 100% of those teachers will implement those unit tasks reviewed during those collaborative planning sessions. And then we'll monitor effectiveness where 50% of the students will make typical growth by the middle of the year, already diagnostic administration, and 60% will make typical growth by the end of the year, already diagnostic administration. Then action step number 2 is that we're going to have Saturday Academy and extended day tutorial sessions that will support identified students based on their performance on the iReady mathematics diagnostic assessments, standards aligned classroom assignments, as well as those formative summative assessments. Targeted tutorial sessions will be designed to support these students who have performed within the beginning level and developing level learner categories on the spring 2023 GMAS, ELA, and math assessments as well. And we're going to monitor implementation. By 75% of the teachers will utilize the iReady instructional technology along with supplementary instructional materials in all ELA classrooms during Saturday Academy and extended day tutorial sessions to improve students' literacy skills as measured by various observation tools. And then 70% of students will score within that range, again, 67% to 70% on the iReady mathematics standards mastery checks on a bi-monthly basis. Then action step number 3, we will implement recommendation number 2 from What Works Clearinghouse. Ms. Lee knows why I'm laughing, to assist students in monitoring and reflecting on the problem-solving process, where we're going to look at providing students with a list of prompts to help them monitor and reflect during the problem-solving process, model how to monitor and reflect on the problem-solving process, and use student thinking about a problem to develop students' ability to monitor and reflect. So in addition to the questions students can ask and answer themselves, they will use the mnemonic cubes, will be utilized in all grade levels, and provide professional learning on how to effectively model and teach cubes to students will be necessary to maintain the fidelity of the implementation of this action step. And yes, of course, 100% of the math teachers will provide evidence of the use of this recommendation during classroom instruction, as evidenced by student organizers, notes, anchor charts, things of that nature, how to use cubes to solve word math problems or math word problems. And then monitoring effectiveness, 70% of students will make a 67% or higher on those weekly iReady assessments. And that
And
is
that's
it.
the
That was the last.
iReady for the math assessments.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's the last one.
Yes, 3 action steps for goal number 4.
Ms. Morrell, do you have a question before I share?
Yes,
my
I
feedback?
do. Thank you. When you go down to, I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
Towards the end, you were talking about, I think I heard you say tutorials.
Yes,
or
extended tutorial.
day or, okay, so what is going on during those tutorials? And how will you monitor the metrics to determine the success of the tutorials?
So basically, the targeted tutorial session is where, based on the deficits that were identified throughout the course of the week. So if it's after school tutorial, then when those students go to the math tutorial, the teacher will know that this group of students, this is what we have to focus on to fill in those learning gaps. And then of course, we'll monitor when we reassess them based on that, math standard that they did not master. But then for Saturday Academy, that same process will be implemented because we actually target specific students for Saturday Academy. Myself, as well as the teachers, we release Saturday Academy letters. So the teachers release Saturday Academy letters. I release emails to parents of students to make them aware that at this time we are mandating that their child comes to Saturday Academy for these, plethora of reasons. And then, of course, that is how we actually get the buy-in and participation for Saturday Academy sessions based on the identified need.
So thank you for that thorough, very thorough explanation. And just to go a step further, I'm really more, I guess, more interested in how, for example, if you see that there's some deficiencies when you drill down into your data and you identify a particular standard and drill down further where you're looking at item analysis and you see where there's a trend where we have a cohort of students, let's say 15 kids that need a particular focus.
Okay.
So how will you guys work collaboratively with your teachers to ensure that they're focused on that particular standard, performance test, whatever it may be, to be able to effectively monitor it. So in other words, I guess I just want to make sure we're maximizing that time and that we are strategic just the same way as we would be with the collaborative planning, that would be folded in terms of, reteaching. There's a plan for that, and we are effectively monitoring those metrics. I know that you said that, but I just want to, I guess for me, I'm more visual.
Right.
What would that look like? And do you all already have tools in place to really capture that data to make sure we know for sure? If I come for a tutorial, I'm Sharonda, what am I coming to do? Is it structured?
Correct.
Not just that I have deficiencies, I need help on these problems, but is there a focus? Is there a lesson plan template for those tutorial sessions? I'm just trying to wrap my mind around it to make sure that time is maximized.
Right. It sounded like you all said that you all are going to utilize the iReady instructional materials during the Saturday Academy. Correct. And you're going to utilize the iReady. Wait a minute. Okay, go on, because it's talking about the iReady mathematics, but it doesn't say anything about reading.
So basically, what's going to happen after every standards mastery check, when the coaches meet with the staff, whether it's math, ELA, when we identify those areas of need, is where we will then implement the reteach and reassess. So we create a calendar for that based on when the students are going to take those standards mastery checks. So that way it is more targeted throughout the course of the regular day, but then we could then drill down because, it's an uncontrollable with students staying for after school tutorial, but definitely when they come to Saturday Academy is where we could definitely plan, because that's a longer time frame from 9 to 12 to ensure that they get the support that they need based on what was identified after each standard mastery check. Yes, ma'am.
So you saying that with the after school tutorials that you all, I understand what you're saying about it being more of, like, how are you going to identify those students for after school tutorials? Is it just who stays or?
Right. So from the standards mastery check is where we identify who the students are when they engage in collaborative planning. And then we create the reteach and reassess, calendar. So that way we would know already in advance who we need with a small group instruction, who needs to be in which group to help fill those gaps. But then they already know who those students are, so we can target them for the after school tutorial as well as Saturday Academy, because that's how the teachers knew which students or parents of students need to receive the Saturday Academy letter. And then I will use.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. How often will you have the Saturday?
So Saturday Academy, we basically try to have at least 8 sessions every semester. And we intentionally have it spread out where we have at least 1 to 2 every month. But it's also intentional in terms of when we have them, either right before the scheduled district progress report dates or before our own scheduled school progress report dates. So
Good
that
question.
way, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, good.
I'm sorry.
Good question. Yeah, good question, because I didn't have that in my mind.
Hold on one second, Dr. Kilcrease. So Miss Morel had a follow-up question about if I had transportation. So right now, no, we do not have transportation specific for Saturday Academy or after school tutorial. However, what we have observed, even though we're over here, is that we actually had an exponential increase in student participation because it wasn't just my voice, but it was or the parent, liaison voice. It was the voice from the teachers. So the parents saw the importance of bringing their kids here from 9 to 12 on those Saturdays. Yes, ma'am.
Could you use funds? I mean, we give you funds, but I mean, do you have transportation people available on Saturday to
which would be the challenge or the possible barrier?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yes,
that's why I
ma'am.
want to make sure if there's something we can do to be proactive to remove any barriers to ensure the success, we certainly want to do that.
Because to create a transportation route that's going to keep changing on a regular basis. Because the students are going to change in terms of who we're targeting. Now there are other students who just come to every Saturday Academy. Like I just know who those kids are. They just come because they want to make sure that they consistently get A's for whatever reason, agreement with their parents.
And I know we're wondering around too, and I don't want to go deep into transportation, but just something to think about, even if we had to do like a little hub drop off.
Right.
That's what I was thinking. Could that help some students? Just something to think about. That could be an option.
That's something to think about, because if they can get them to the hub, then it doesn't matter, where they stay. The parents know to get them there, and then they can get transported over. Something to think about.
Okay.
So you and Miss Morel, y'all talk about that. Miss Morel, you'll be able to help us with transportation and talk to them about that.
I'm gonna help with anything I can to ensure that this team is successful. You better know that.
I love you already.
And I love you more.
So I'm going to share my last bit of feedback for these particular 3 action steps for goal 4. I know, like I said, I know you're playing back and forth.
She really does. She's going
I do.
I love it.
I've been pouring into it, so I'm excited.
I love it.
So with this action step, you say a lot. I just suggested providing job embedded professional learning for teachers to internalize the new math units, and then I just added and to learn how to implement the math manipulatives.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I just said implement Saturday school just to keep it consistent with the verb. Okay.
Correct.
To provide identify students with targeted support through intervention or remediation. You talked about how you're going to get them there for the beginning, but as you just stated, it's going to be fluid, so it'll change. So that's why I crossed all that out.
Okay.
Then I asked, does this need to be housed, this action step, up under the first goal? Because you're working with all students and it's not just on math, is it? Or is it just reading and math?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, then.
We definitely need to add it to the first goal. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you're going to move that to the first goal. Okay.
Well, I'm actually, so we're going to add it to the first goal as well. So we're not going to remove it. We're just going to leave it there, but add it to the first goal.
Okay, then. Okay, either way. All right. And then right here with the effectiveness, you talked about the iReady mathematics standards mastery checks on a bi-monthly basis, but what about reading? Are you going to check anything with reading? Because they are doing reading and math, right? In the extended learning or the extended day tutorial sessions?
Correct, but this goal is on math.
Okay, so if you move it up there, then you'll say reading, and if you keep it down here, you're just gonna stick with the math.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So this is the math goal.
Right.
Yes,
okay. Okay. All righty.
Reading and math tutorials.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay, and then the last one, we implement the CUBES problem solving strategy. I just reworded that.
That's why I was laughing when I read it, because I already knew it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That's fine.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it. Okay, so we have gone through the entire plan. Our next thing that was on the list, but we've kind of discussed, we've kind of like included it all the way through. Mr. Morrell, we were going to give you an opportunity to describe the district support, but you've been, adding that as we've been going along, unless you wanted to say anything else about the district support of this plan.
Absolutely. I just want to chime in, and I'll come in a little bit closer so you guys can see me.
Okay.
Our team has spent a considerable amount of time just talking through the tiers of supports to schools. And of course, we realize and we appreciate our partnership with you, all of you all from the state. And so we want to come alongside, of course, with all of you when you're here on the ground. So our team has gone either a step further to make sure we identify and we do these instructional rounds together. And so when we look at the tiers of supports, that even the frequency of the visits, and Dr. Panton has access to our calendar. We calendared out all of our dates already for all of our schools, and they received that on June 2nd. They
Okay.
also received a notebook. You see me, I'm looking around. Oh, there it is. I have one too. I made one just for this today. So it has all of those resources in case you want a hard copy. Of course, we wish to kill the trees, but they have everything in our shared Google Drive as well. So access to any forms, anything that they need, everything is aligned with, of course, the state's plans or your tools, your recommendations, everything's aligned. It truly is. And so I think we are in a good place to have a good start with the robust supports that we have for Mercer. I really do. And I am looking forward to this partnership with you all. And so knowing the tier 4 school supports, we're making sure that we maximize those. And we want to make sure that our learning specialists, our content specialists, when we do our first instructional rounds, that is going to include our specialists, content as well as learning specialists, as well as literacy specialists. So just wanted to share that with you as well, because we want to make sure we calibrate and debrief, and that we bring them alongside us as we go deep into all of these best practices, the robust plans, everything that has transpired since we've been together on this journey. So just know that, we're right here with you. We're going to learn and grow together. And I'm super excited to be on this journey with you. I know we have the right leader, right principal, that is going to continue to work to build a capacity with his team. And so we will do this together. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Appreciate that. I appreciate that, Ms. Morrell. Ms. Lee, do you have anything to add before I talk about the next steps?
Well, I'll just, I know it feels like a lot of different things that we're going to be juggling, but we really have tried very hard to think about the impact on teachers. They stayed at the forefront of every conversation during our leadership team meetings, during admin meetings. We're always thinking about their time, and we truly see it as an investment in them because, it's developing their capacity. And I've told them many, many times, school improvement is messy. It's not fun sometimes, but in the end, it's one of the most beautiful experiences they'll have, to be a part of. And so working on keeping them inspired is going to be a real goal for all. And Dr. Panton does such a wonderful job with that. Sending
Yes, he
out
does. Yes, he
such
does.
warm fuzzies all the time.
But you all, I did not ask the question about your first quarter staff, which I do know that you all have been working on. Is there anything you want to say about that before I talk about next steps?
So basically our quarter 1 staff, it has been finished. We're just waiting for review and feedback by other members of our leadership team, and that's going to happen on the first day of pre-planning when we have our first leadership team meeting. So I mean, I will gladly share that if you want to look at that to get feedback, but also lend insight into how we've scaffolded out the implementation of the action steps for each goal.
If you can go on and share that with me, that would be great. With me
Okay.
understanding that you're not, you know what I mean, that you're still getting
Correct.
feedback from your other team members, that would be great. I just kind of want to see the flow, especially since today was such a great presentation. I would just like to see how you're starting to think. So of
Yes, ma'am.
course, without giving me, I won't give you any feedback on it, but it will just be a great way for me to see the segue from the school improvement plan to the short-term action plan.
Yes, ma'am.
When is that first leadership team meeting? What do you know? Do you have a date already?
So our first leadership team meeting is going to happen on the, hold on, I'll tell you. It will be on August 8th. Will be
Okay.
our first leadership team meeting. Yep, every
Okay.
second and fourth. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the next steps will include Ms. Morrell really giving us some more information about the EL and whatever it is that they were able to come up with of how we can monitor our students on an ongoing basis. She'll provide some more information and clarity about that. We will, from the state, I will be reaching out to see if there. I tell you what, Ms. Morrell, if you can give me some more specifics on what kind of support you would need from the state, as far as the English language learners are concerned, I certainly can seek some help and support to see if there's anything that they can do and help support us with. So you just let me know.
Absolutely.
Can you share the dates also for your walks and anything else that you all said that you all have already mapped out for the district? Can you share that with us so that we can just see how we can support you all and anything, for the year, so we can go on and put it on our calendars? And then Miss Lee and I will follow up with a finalized feedback form, but you already have it. And guess what? I'm going to follow up with this video. So if you ever want to go back, and just listen and say, well, what did we say about this? Then you can go back. So
Yes, ma'am.
thank you all so very much for very focused conversation. I know it took a long time, but I do believe that the conversation was necessary. I think it was rich.
I agree.
I got a lot of clarity from it. It's so much better than me just reading the plan. I got to know the work that came behind it. And Ms. Morrell, thank you so much for your attentiveness and your questions. You did an excellent job with coaching today. So I just appreciate that. And I know that I asked Dr. Patton if I could use this. Let me stop recording for a second. Hold on for 1 second. I know I promised Dr. Patton that I